What if I told you that this is one of Toyota's most important electric cars? And it's also their most underwhelming. That pains me to say. This is the new Toyota Urban Cruiser. It's Toyota's entry into one of the most competitive segments in the UK right now. Of course, it's the small electric SUV market. This starts at just under £30,000, promises up to 264 miles of range, and carries all the reassurances that you may expect from a Toyota badge. But here's the thing, in 2026, good enough might just not be good enough anymore. So today, let's find out whether the Urban Cruiser is a sensible hidden gem or whether Toyota has played this one a little too safe. Hi guys, Tish here and welcome back to my channel Also Social UK. In today's video, we're checking out all things Urban Cruiser. So if that sounds good, then please keep watching. And if you like new car reviews and car content, well, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. The Urban Cruiser measures just under 4.3 metres long, 1.8 metres wide and a touch over 1.6 metres tall, and it sits on a 2.7 metre wheelbase. That's actually 140 millimetres longer between the wheels than the Yaris Cross, which is important when we talk about space later on. In the UK, prices start at £29,995 for the Icon, £33,495 for the Design and £35,745 for the Excel. Now there's actually two different battery sizes available for the Urban Cruiser. There's an entry-level model which gets a 49 kilowatt hour battery, producing 106 kilowatts of power or 142 brake horsepower and up to 213 miles of WLTP claimed range. Now move up to the larger 61 kilowatt hour battery and you get 128 kilowatts of power, that's 172 brake horsepower and up to 264 miles of electric range. That's the one that I'm driving. Rapid charging actually peaks at 67 kilowatts, with Toyota quoting roughly 45 minutes for a substantial top up. Now that's disappointing, and it's behind quite a lot of this car's rivals. It's worth noting that this is a global product. The Urban Cruiser is built outside of the UK and Europe and brought here as part of Toyota's broader electric expansion strategy. That international development approach helps keep costs controlled, but it also means that this car has been engineered for wide appeal rather than specifically tuned around European enthusiasts. So it could mean the driving experience is compromised, and that really sets the tone for what this car is. Now, when it comes to design, this is never going to be the most exciting car in the car park, but actually, I think it looks pretty good. It's relatively understated and I think many people are going to appreciate that. What I do like is the fact that this is an adopted member of the Toyota family. This is originally built and developed by Suzuki with a Toyota badge, not the other way around that many people think. But despite that, it really fits into the Toyota family. It reminds me a lot of the Aygo and the Yaris Cross, so I really think that works well. I also like the fact that it's got relatively narrow proportions, so when you're parking this vehicle, you have loads of space around you, which is definitely not a given nowadays. I like the colourway. So you've got this metallic green and then you've got the contrasting black elements around these headlamps that runs all the way to the centre of the car, and then you've got gloss black at the bottom as well. And then once again, you've got those chunky off-road elements of these plastic wheel arches. This is in no way an off-roader. I'm going to talk about that when I'm driving it, but I do like that it has that slightly chunkier, more kind of rugged detailing that you get on things like the Yaris and also the Aygo Cross. It sits on 18-inch alloy wheels, which I think are really practical. They're going to help with ride comfort. Again, I'm going to go over that. So that's the main styling around the front, but what about around the back? Well, once again, this is actually one of my favourite views of this car. I quite like it. This is going to be controversial, so let me know what you think of the styling down below. But I really like all this chunkiness. So you've got this chunky black plastic here, and it does feel quite squat, which I really like. I also like these 3D lights, so you have this kind of see-through element. They use these on a lot of new products from Renault, and I really like them. And when it's illuminated at night, looks quite smart. So that's the positives. But I think we need to talk about a negative back here, and that is boot space. So first of all, before we even move on to boot space, the boot is manual, and listen to this. Quality is not brilliant there, and that's the thing with working with Suzuki. You see, you can work with Suzuki and you'll get a brilliantly reliable car, but then when it comes to fit and finish, it's a little bit cheap in places. So it depends on what you prioritise. The load height is actually relatively high, so that's going to work with some people, but if you've got poor mobility, it's going to be quite difficult to lift items up. But you do have a flat load area, and then all of this is black plastic. So you're not going to scratch anything if you're kind of like hoiking things up, which you may need to, because this is the charging bag, which is absolutely ginormous. And as you can see, there is not a huge amount of space in the back. So you don't get much storage underneath. You've got a little bit to kind of like tuck things away, but you get just under 240 litres when you have the seats in their backward position. And I'll show you in a minute when we sit in it, but you can slide those forward and then you gain 310 litres. If you need both legroom and boot space, maybe it's time to look at a different model. It's no secret nowadays that we're spoilt by the Chinese manufacturers, putting every bell and whistle and all their high quality interiors straight into even the entry level products. So when we get in a car like this in the urban cruiser and we see fabric seats, oh, the horror of fabric seats. They don't look the nicest, they're quite dull, but they are comfortable and they don't get super hot in the summer, don't get super cold in the winter. So they do actually have their practicality elements, and you do still get heated seats in this car, even with them being fabric, but they are still also manual, which once again, it's a little bit of a shame to see nowadays. But if you just want something simple, then I think you're gonna quite like this interior. Going back to those heated seats, I wanna talk about that because if you've watched my EV3 Suzuki review, you'll know it's super hard to turn on the heated seats. You have to go into climate and then you have to go into the heated seats. It brings up a separate page and then you have to turn the heated seats on. But interestingly, you can use voice command in this car, but it feels like voice command from 10 years ago. Are you ready? Turn on my heated seat.
I'm turning on heating for the driver's seat.
We got there. But that does work and it does make things easier if you want to do things like, can you get me directions to the closest McDonald's?
I found these places. Which do you want? Sure. McDonald's. Starting navigation.
Okay, so it's a little bit slower than some of the best systems out there, but you know what? It works. And the rest of the touchscreen is very simple, and I think that's the most important thing. You do also have built-in navigation as well, so when you're not using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is wireless on this car, you can use the main satellite navigation, which I think the target audience of the urban cruiser will quite like. Now let's talk about the materials. You have a nice steering wheel. You've got some really nice buttons on this steering wheel here. Flat bottom, bit sporty. Yeah, not really. You've got this kind of like textured plastic across the dashboard, and then you've got these kind of like high gloss elements around the air vents. You have got some physical buttons here for the climate control. Big thumbs up, Toyota / Suzuki. And then centre console, absolutely covered in gloss black. We hate gloss black, don't we? 2 cup holders, and we've got a storage section here. It's not wireless charging, which is a real shame. And you've got a few buttons, so you have your regenerative braking, which you do have to turn on every time you get in this car, which is a bit annoying, but it does remember your drive mode. So if you have it in eco the last time, then it will keep it in eco. So quite like that. And I do actually quite like this gear selector as well. But talking about this gloss black, I decided that I was going to hairspray my entire hair the other day inside of the cabin of this car. Yeah, probably not the best thing to do. And I have not been able to get it off of this black plastic. It is so sticky, fingerprints galore, and now it just has like hairspray embedded in it, which is not ideal. Partly my fault, but also you wouldn't be able to notice if that wasn't gloss black. Storage, got storage inside of this armrest here, and a bit of storage underneath there as well. Decent sized glove box, decent sized door cards. You know what? It's all right. It's a little bit drab, it's a little bit plasticky in places, but everything works. Everything is where I expect it to be, and I think that counts for a lot nowadays. Right, moving on to rear interior space. And it's a bit of a mixed bag in here. There's good points and bad points. So firstly, on the bad points, it's pretty dark. You've got a dark headlining, you've got dark plastic on the doors and dark fabrics on the seats. And including the tinted windows on the outside and the fact that these windows are relatively small, it does feel quite dark in here. That being said, it's not cramped. I've got a decent amount of room. Next, moving me on to amenities. It doesn't go above and beyond. So I've got a couple of charging points. There's a USB and a USB-C. So there's a central armrest, a couple of cup holders, and you've also got some through loading. Now that is really positive because cars from Stellantis, like the Jeep Avenger and the Fiat 600e, neither of those have a central armrest, and they also don't have any storage in the doors either, and we have got these in the urban cruiser, so that makes it a bit more practical. It doesn't feel exactly high quality in the back here. There is lots of plasticky materials, but I have got 2 ISOFIX fitments on either side, and the plus point in this car, I have a sliding rear bench. So having a sliding rear bench really aids with practicality. You can add to the boot space, or you can also give more legroom to the people in the back. Talking about legroom, you've got a completely flat floor, so unlike cars which are developed on hybrid or on ICE platforms, that means you have plenty more legroom, even though this centre console comes a little bit far back. Now, if we slide this seat all the way forward, you will notice that I still have a decent level of legroom, and this seat is in my driving position. So it's good to know, even with all of the seats slid all the way back, you can seat a 5'5" and a 5'5" person in the urban cruiser. So it may not be the biggest car in this class, but let's face it, for the average family, I think it's going to be perfectly fine. Thank you so much for the ice cream man that decided he wants to deliver ice cream whilst it's raining in February. So I've said that the driving experience could be compromised, but let's talk about how this car drives, because this is where you really start to understand what the urban cruiser is and also what it isn't. Starting with the performance. The 61 kilowatt-hour version, this model, produces 172 brake horsepower and 189 newton-meters of torque, and because this is an EV, the torque is delivered instantly, so around town it feels responsive and clean off the line. Acceleration is very linear. There's no aggressive surge, no dramatic shove, just smooth, progressive build of speed. It feels pretty measured rather than energetic. For daily commuting, school runs and city driving, I think it's absolutely fine. But it doesn't feel lively. It's definitely tuned for calmness rather than character. But what about the comfort? Well, at lower speeds, and particularly over typical urban potholes and broken tarmac, the urban cruiser absorbs impacts reasonably well. It doesn't crash or thump over bumps. However, once you get onto slightly rougher B roads, there's definitely a noticeable firmness to the suspension. Now, I'm not saying that this is not comfortable, but it's also not particularly plush either. It definitely feels like Toyota has perhaps prioritised body control over softness, and in the corners, roll is actually fairly well contained for a small compact SUV, which gives it stability. But the steering, while light and accurate, doesn't exactly offer much feedback. You place the car confidently enough, but you're not really connected to it. Dynamically, it feels safe, it's predictable, and it's competent, but at motorway speeds, refinement is relatively decent. Wind noise is well managed, and while you do get some tyre noise on coarser UK surfaces, it never becomes intrusive. It feels stable and secure at speed, which I think will appeal to family buyers. Now, regenerative braking is fairly gentle. Lift off the accelerator and you get a mild deceleration, but not a strong one-pedal driving. The transition between regen and friction brakes is smooth enough though, which makes it easy to drive smoothly in traffic. But I do want to talk about traction. Now, in the UK, the urban cruiser is front-wheel drive only. There isn't the option of having an all-wheel drive available here, even though the closely related Suzuki EV3, which shares much of its underlying platform and engineering, does actually offer a dual-motor all-wheel drive version in certain markets, including the UK. And actually, I do think that's important because on slippery real-world conditions, you can feel the limitations of this single front motor. Now, when I pulled onto a muddy verge to let someone go and then tried to rejoin the road, there was noticeable wheel spin from the front tyres. The car hesitated slightly before the traction control stepped in and it gathered things up. In that moment, a dual-motor four-wheel drive setup, like the one available in the Suzuki, probably would have helped. Toyota does, however, include a snow mode, which often softens the throttle response and just adjusts the traction control intervention to reduce wheel spin on slippery surfaces. It makes power delivery more progressive, and it also intervenes earlier if slip is detected. On wet or slightly snowy roads, it definitely improves composure. So if I pull over again, I'll remember to put that on. But let's face it, that's not a true replacement for all-wheel drive, and when conditions get properly slippery, it's gonna spin. Now, Toyota may well have decided not to bring the all-wheel drive to the UK to keep the pricing competitive and to maintain clear positioning within the range, but it does mean that buyers here don't get the most capable version of this platform. And I think that really sums up how this car drives overall. It prioritises reassurance over reward, stability over sparkle, and ease over excitement. For some buyers, that will be probably exactly what they want. But for others, like me, it may leave them wishing for a little bit more personality behind the wheel. This particular model's larger 61 kilowatt hour battery and 264 mile WLTP range is respectable on paper, but in real motorway conditions, well, you're going to naturally see less. I was sitting at 2 miles per kilowatt hour. Charging is 67 kilowatts, which is serviceable, but it's not especially quick, especially compared to some of its rivals. So longer journeys are definitely going to require a bit more patience. Toyota does, however, fit a heat pump as standard, and it uses lithium iron phosphate battery chemistry, which should help with long-term durability and winter efficiency. Again, these are sensible decisions, but they're not exactly groundbreaking. At a touch under £30,000, this isn't exactly outrageously priced, but in a segment which is packed full of EVs that charge faster, that feel more modern inside and offer more personality, the urban cruiser doesn't exactly dominate any particular category. What it does offer, however, is reassurance. Safety tech is strong across the range, and also the packaging is relatively clever, and Toyota's reputation for reliability remains a huge draw, actually along with Suzuki's. But in a rapidly evolving EV market, being sensible alone may not be enough to stand out. Toyota has been known for building some of the most impressive hybrid vehicles on the market, and they've absolutely mastered that space. And there's an old saying, stick to what you know. Unfortunately, it feels like the urban cruiser just proves that point, and I hate to say it. It's not a bad car, it's practical, it's safe, it's easy to drive, it's engineered with the kind of long-term thinking that Toyota is famous for. The sliding rear seats are clever, the safety tech is strong, the day-to-day usability is solid, but emotionally, this feels like a compliance car, a car which has been built because it needed to exist, not because somebody in the design or engineering team was desperate to make something truly exciting. In a market that's now full of bold, characterful electric cars, the urban cruiser just feels cautious, very cautious, and maybe for some buyers, that's exactly what they want. But for me, I can't help but think Toyota is much more capable of building something far more exciting. But let me know what you think down below. I really hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to see more, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Until next time, guys, see you later.